Hey guys, it's Faye and I am back with an all-new video. Today's topic is a mini behind the veil energy read into the singer known as Yungblud. So if that sounds good to you, please stick around, and if not, I will catch you at another video. Now, before we dive into the behind the veil energy read of him, I'm just going to share a bit of 3D information about him in case you are like me and you are, or were not, prior to this video, familiar with him. So here we go. Dominic Richard Harrison, born on August 5th, 1997, professionally known as Yungblud, is an English singer, songwriter, and actor. He has an estimated net worth of $1 million. Now, before I get into the energy read on him, I'm just going to share that what I was originally directed to look into him was because it seems like he and his appearance has changed very noticeably and notably over the last few years. And for me to look into and to see if it's because he's perhaps in the club or what else may actually in fact be comprising the change to his physical appearance. And after I had looked into him on an energetic level, when I was sitting down last night to write down the 3D information about him, and I Googled his name, Yungblud, the image that came up was in fact so jarring that I was a little bit freaked out. I was a little bit weirded out. And I can see why the question was, what has changed about him? Because I was looking through some of the earlier pictures of him. He is not actually on his own bad looking. He has like a beautiful chiseled jaw. He has these big luscious lips. He has these brilliant, beautiful blue eyes. And to see this devolution in terms of his physical appearance from being a clean-cut looking younger guy to how he looks now, I'm actually in fact going to try to find the most jarring picture of him to place with this video so you can understand. It was a little intense. Just to kind of like see who he is and then understanding why I was asked to look into him. And what had come in I found to be particularly insightful. It also does pertain to previous videos that I have done, which I will link down below if you would like to go back and view them at a different time. So here we go. Here's the energy read on Yungblud. So Yungblud isn't sure what exactly has happened to him, by his own admissions. He feels often like he is out of his body, but he has no idea how or why it happens. And when he comes back into himself and comes back to his body, he has no memory of what has happened to him when he was out of it. So I ask him if he's familiar with trauma and how trauma can cause somebody to disassociate out of their body, and in some extreme cases can actually, the person can end up being diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder, which used to be known as multiple personality disorder. So I ask him if he's familiar with trauma and if he thinks he is disassociating during that time. Like, is this a trauma-based disassociation? And he tells me no. The first time it happened, when he was first taken out of his body, or he was first having the experience of being out of his body, he had smoked something different than just usual weed that he had been smoking. It was like a different blend or a different strain. He had smoked this for the very first time, and bam, he was out of his body. Now, this is also going to connect to previous videos that I have done, notably videos that I have done on alcohol and recreational drugs, and that when we ingest them or imbibe these things, it is actually leaving our physical vessel, our physical body, porous. So look at it, if you will, like when you are sober, you're in a car in a great neighborhood and it's midday, the sun is overhead, and you don't have a care in the world. But when we are ingesting, let's say, alcohol or taking recreational drugs, it leaves our physical vessel compromised. So it would be more, if you will, akin to being in a bad neighborhood, sitting in your car, playing on your phone. Your car doesn't have automatic locks, so not all of the doors are locked. You got bird poop on your windshield in the front, and you don't have any rear view cameras. And you're just sitting there in the dark in the bad neighborhood with doors on your car that you can't even lock, playing on your phone, being completely out of it. So one could say in a scenario like that, that person would be compromised and in a more vulnerable situation. And maybe across the street, there's some carjacker with nefarious intentions, and they're looking at this and they're like, here we go, jackpot. So it leaves the person vulnerable to perhaps being thrown into the passenger seat and being taken on a joyride by the person that has carjacked them. But then let's say this carjacker, what they want to do is go pick up a bunch of their buddies. They're not picking up their buddies to have their buddies sit in the back. So you're going to get thrown into the back. You're going to sit with a buddy and he's got another buddy in the front. But then let's say this carjacker is picking up another friend and now there's no room for you at all. Maybe you're going to be thrown into the trunk, or maybe at that point you're going to be thrown out of the car entirely, and it's in your entirety. This is kind of showing you the evolution, or if you will, the devolution of how we lose more and more control over our physical body depending on the level of inebriation that we are at, or the level of inebriation that we are actually at. Sometimes you can be so blackout drunk, it's like you're thrown out of your vessel in its entirety. You blacked out, you're not even in your body at that point. Maybe you're just really, really shit-faced. It's like you're in the back seat. You have no control over the vessel. You have no control of the vehicle that you are in at that point. So he is sharing that he had smoked something he had never smoked before, and bam, it threw him out of his body because it was maybe a more potent strain than anything else that he had ever ingested prior to that before. But he does not understand how, if he's out of his body, how he is in fact alive. And his conclusion is a grim one. It's that he is inhabited. And he, in fact, is inhabited. He's been thrown into the trunk of his own car, or he's been thrown out of the car. Somebody carjacked him, i.e. his body, i.e. his vessel, and has taken him on a joyride. That's why he doesn't remember what's going on with his body when he's out of it. And the thought that he is inhabited gives him a serious case of ick, because he doesn't know who or what the entity is and how it is changing him by hosting it. And he had shared with me he has some anxiety about it, and that he smokes and drinks a lot to cope with it. And that he does not necessarily consider himself to be, I'm not going to say the word, I'm going to dance around it. He doesn't consider himself to be a person that would unalive themselves, but that does not preclude him from sometimes thinking about it, and that might be something that he would have to do to end the parasitic and toxic relationship he has with the entity that is inhabiting his body. And he concedes it's pretty fucked up because he is not whatever that thing has turned him into. And as an energy reader, I agree. Because while I do not know him personally, nor who he is outside of his energy, he himself does not have so-called bad, quote-unquote, energy. And he is not, for example, a devil worshiper. He hasn't turned into this version of himself in present day time because this is the devolution of his character and of his soul because he has joined the club and who he has then therefore been turned into because of it. This is not a representation of his image that is being put out onto the world stage. I remind you, he's got $1 million. And again, I'm not knocking it. It's still $1 million. But for him to be in the club, for this to be the devolution of him, it's going to have cost a lot more than $1 million. Like the $1 million he has, look at it like he's almost lucky. Or a better way of putting it, because we don't believe in luck here on this channel, everything is a vibrational match for who and what we actually are. Or it's a soul contract that he had designed for himself in this lifetime. So the $1 million that he has is perhaps a soul contract or a blessing that he has accumulated in a past lifetime that he gets to collect on in this one. But it's not that he has $1 million because he's in the club and this is the representation of his image. Like at this point where he is and the way that he represents, frankly, they wouldn't even want him. His energy and his vibration at this point is so low vibe, they wouldn't even want him. And that is saying a lot. But again, outside of the fact that he is inhabited, he doesn't have like bad energy per se. He's not a devil worshiper or somebody that has dark thoughts about other people or wants to hurt other people. He's, in all honesty, aside from this, was a pretty balanced person. Which I know, again, is going to kind of make us wonder, like, okay, he was balanced, so how did he get from point A to point B? Like, how did he get from there to here? Don't worry, I gotcha. But before I gotcha and explain that, he asked me if I can help him. And I explained to him that I cannot do an exorcism if that's what he's asking me, nor can I do anything like that. But what I can do, and what I do on this channel, that's a funny way of putting it, is that I can counsel him on raising his vibration, which will in turn expel the entity as they will no longer be an energetic match for one another. And he appeared to be all ears when I had said this to him. So the first thing I say is he absolutely must stop drinking and smoking. As first and foremost, smoking, and I'm not talking about cigarettes, although certainly cigarettes are low vibe, but if he's smoking weed or anything of that nature, that is what has opened him up in the first place that led him to be inhabited. So if he's continuing to smoke mind-altering things, whatever they may be, that's going to continue to leave him energetically open and porous. Same thing with alcohol. And it's at this point, after I had pointed this out to him, he seemed kind of leery. And he tells me it's the only coping mechanism he has. So it's at the point that he had shared this with me, and I'm kind of starting to see why or how he is in fact an energetic match for whatever this thing is that's inhabiting him. So then I tell him some other things that he may be able to do is drink some water. Like I'm talking to him the way I would talk to my own kid, because he is a kid. Drink some water. Get outside. Get a good night's sleep. Have a decent meal. Put on some high vibe music. Or go for a walk or even work out. But he looks around at the current state of his life, and it all seems, from his perspective anyway, far too insurmountable to do even one of those things. And he shared with me he thinks he is too far out of himself and the entity has more and more control over him, and soon he will be wedged out of himself altogether. Real life adding a punctuation to the channeled information. And when he says this to me, he has real fear in his eyes, and he was genuinely concerned for what will happen to him and his soul's essence when and if that in fact happens. and if he will still have a place with God if that happens. So I assure him he will. He always will, and we always will as well. So I tell him to pray, or if he doesn't want to pray, to just talk to God without prayer. Like, oh, hey, what's up, God? Just talk to God. Just reorient yourself. Open the lines of communication again. Or even just to think of God. And he tells me he is angry at God, and it has some shit to do with something he can't remember what it is. But it's something from when he was a kid, and it had to do with God, and that he was calling out to God, but he had not been answered. And at that moment, he, quote, realized there was no God, end quote. So he had stepped away from a God that he did not perceive to exist. And well then, isn't this just providing more context for how he was taken over? So he hasn't stepped away from God because he's in the club. He stepped away from God because of something that he endured or something that he experienced, and it challenged his belief in this idea of a God being in existence because he called out to God and God never even bothered answering him. And I realize at this point, not everyone wants our help, and he may in fact be one of those people. Because don't we all, for example, know that person or have that friend that no matter what our intentions are or how we counsel them, every response to what we say, no matter how good our advice may be, is yes, but. Because they don't in fact want solutions, nor do they want to change, but in fact want to stay the same and tell us why it's too hard for them to change. And Yungblud is one such person, and that despite his pleas for help and counsel about redemption, he is in exact vibrational match for the life he leads and the entity that's in it. And thus, this is not an energy that I myself want to be in a moment longer, and I disconnect from him. So that is the mini Behind the Veil energy read that I have for you on the singer Yungblud. Please take what resonates and leave the rest behind. And I, especially now more than ever, remind you the importance of our vibration and maintaining a positive vibration. So stay in the high vibration.